Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Thousands of jobs are to go as a giant of the high street, BHS, is to be wound down by administrators. The news emerged this afternoon after efforts to find a buyer for the troubled business failed. Altogether, some 11,000 jobs are at risk with the collapse of the firm. It has 163 stores across the UK. They will now hold closing down sales over the coming weeks. It ends an 88-year-long history for the firm, which was last year sold for £1 by Sir Phillip Green. Here's our business editor, Simon Jack.
A desperate last-ditch campaign to get the public behind a 90-year high street veteran today ended in failure. With no buyer found, the company will be liquidated, its assets sold off, and its 11,000 employees will be out of a job. It's the biggest high street collapse since Woolworths went bust in 2008. Shoppers around the country expressed their shock at today's news.
I'm sad to see it go, yeah. It's a shame because, you know, we're losing an awful lot of retail shops here for clothing and things like that.
I think it's terrible for the country. Woolworths went, our British Home Stores. What's next?
I'm a bit angry as well that despite having so many millionaires in this country, we couldn't save a British store.
And yet maybe it should not have come as such a surprise. Retail experts say BHS has been losing touch with its own customers for years.
Great retailing today is about destination. Lots of people do the research online and then they go for a reason. There was no reason to come here. It wasn't the cheapest. It wasn't the most innovative. It didn't have an extraordinary shopping experience. It didn't have a brilliant food offer. And it never led the way in anything. And therefore, it fell by the wayside. As simple as that.
Great value, good quality.
But this was no normal retail failure. It's as much a tale about its owners. Billionaire tycoon Sir Phillip Green owned BHS for 15 years, and at first profits rolled in and then straight out again as he took hundreds of millions of pounds in dividends. In later years, BHS was propped up by the rest of Sir Phillip Green's empire until finally he sold it last year for just £1 to this man, former racing driver and former bankrupt Dominic Chappell, a man with no retail experience whatsoever. He took millions out of the company in fees and loans before it collapsed into administration in April. Despite multiple expressions of interest, no credible buyer was found and the plug was pulled today.
My reaction is little compared with the 11,000 workers who now face the dole queue and the 20,000 people who built up and expect, if not already to draw a pension. They must feel very deserted. And we know other people in this whole terrible saga have been able to walk away, taking quite a bit of money with them.
As the doors close tonight, those issues and many more remain open.
And Simon's here with me now. Simon, how inevitable was this end to BHS?
Well, in many ways, that's economic life. Companies that don't keep up with the time, don't adapt to the changing customer needs, they perish, other ones thrive. That's just life. But this is more than that. This is really a story about the owners, how much money they took out of the business. Did they put it in an enfeebled state so it had very little chance of surviving? Those are the questions that are going to be asked of Phillip Green and Dominic Chappell, who face MPs, including Frank Field, who you saw in that piece. They're going to want to know how much you took out, how much did you know, did Phillip Green sell it to an irresponsible new owner? Those are some of the things that will remain open. So very far from a normal retail bust, this one.
OK, Simon, thank you.
Now, there was actually, while we've been talking about a business story, there was a huge piece of separate business news in this country today. It was the demise of BHS, British Home Stores. No saviour in sight. It is, in fact, to be liquidated. The BBC's business editor, Simon Jack, joined me. Simon, now, would you categorise this as like a normal business failure? Companies do obviously have bad luck, they have bad performance, they go out of business. Or is there something more to this, do you think?
I think in one way it's not a unique story. It's sort of commerce 101. Some companies adapt to changing needs, give their customers what they want as they change, and they flourish. and other businesses lose touch with their customers and perish. And then the ecosystem changes, the ones thrive and some perish. And that's just life, that's just commerce. But I think you're right. I think there'll be questions about, there'll be technical, there'll be legal issues here. There'll also be, I think, some moral issues, because obviously some people made an awful lot of money out of this. And is it right to take that much cash out, leaving a company enfeebled and leaving 11,000 employees in this case to fend for themselves when some people enrich themselves? Now, other people say that's rubbish, that is just business, grow up. But I think there are issues about this, partly because of the characters involved. Phillip Green's expecting the delivery of another yacht, and yet he's going to do that against the backdrop of thousands of people out of work.
I mean, it's the end of BHS, but it's not the end of the process, is it? Because all these questions are being asked. What are the main questions to be asked now about that business and what happened?
Well, there are, 2 committees of MPs looking at it. The Insolvency Service is looking at it. The Serious Fraud Office, we think, has had a look at it and may take it further. I think the key question for me is, did Phillip Green knowingly sell a company to someone who was totally unqualified and had zero retail experience, and maybe no ability, maybe no inclination to turn this business around? And by doing so, was he knowingly condemning his workforce to the fate that we see today? I think that's one of them. And the other one is, how was it that someone who was a former racing driver, a former bankrupt, with a patchy, very patchy business history, how did he take over a concern of this size? Now, Phillip Green will say, look, and I know he'll say this because I've spoken to him about it, he'll say, look, this guy arrived, he had money in the bank, he had a fleet of professional advisors, there's A to Z of blue chip firms who are involved in this transaction, all of whom are supposed to have due diligence controls, corporate governance controls. They're meant to check lots of boxes. And what's emerged for me from the session so far is that everyone was looking at this tiny little bit of the deal. Does this pass muster here? Does this pass muster there? Rather than anyone taking a big, a long, hard look, does this make any sense at all? And I suspect that will be the question. And perhaps the only person who can answer that is Sir Phillip Green himself.
Simon, thank you.
I've been getting